off by acknowledging the lands that we're on. So Royal Roads University is located on the traditional lands of the Kosepsum and the Lekwungen ancestors and families. And I'm working from home right now, and I'm on the traditional unceded territory of the Cowichan peoples. So really just want to take this moment to all acknowledge the lands that we get to work on and that we get to play and live, especially with the recent news that has been happening and discoveries. Yeah, I really want to take this moment to always be conscious of where we are. So today we are going to be talking about the MA and the MSc in Environment and Management program. So my name is Christy Jones. I'm an education advisor at the university, and I am very pleased to be joined today by Dr. Chris Ling, who is an associate professor of the program. He's also a program head within the School of Environment and Sustainability.
Hi, everyone.
So a few more welcome and introductions. We're also joined by some wonderful folks helping us behind the scenes. We have Mark Dickinson, who is helping with our tech backup support. So if you have any challenges with your technology or anything today, feel free to send us a message and we'll try to help you troubleshoot from there. We're also joined by some of our amazing enrollment team. So we have Bev Hill and Alana McConaughey, who are helping in the chat box as well, providing useful links and things like that. And then I believe we also have some of the team members from the School of Environment and Sustainability, Heather and Lauren. So we have lots of hands on deck to help answer any questions that come up today. And looking at the chat box for a few more introductions from all of you, I can see there's folks joining us from Esquimalt, Kamloops, Halifax, India. Wonderful. So if you haven't introduced yourselves yet, feel free to just type in the chat box and let us know where you are joining from. And to continue on through our agenda, so we'll be starting off with a brief overview of the Royal Roads University experience and what it's like to be a student with us. Then Chris will be taking us through an introduction to some of the MEM themes and give you a little bit of the learning experience part of the program. Then we'll be getting into the program specific information itself, application process, and of course we want to answer your questions throughout the webinar. So don't be shy if you're thinking of anything throughout the presentation to type that into the chat box. Chances are if you're thinking of a question, somebody else probably has the same question too. So why explore studying at Royal Roads? So here is a list of reasons. The first one here is we see life as a qualification. So when you apply to one of our programs, we look at who you are holistically and not just what your transcript says. And this is demonstrated in our flexible admissions policy that we'll dig into a little bit more towards the end of the presentation, but we like to look at your life experience, what type of work you've done, volunteer experience, any projects that you've been a part of, conferences you've attended, anything like that, as well as just life experience in general. We think that's a really valuable part of who you are and what you bring into the program. Next here, profs who know your name. So we provide a very personalized experience at Royal Roads. We don't have a model like many of the other larger universities where you are just one person in a sea of a large auditorium, a lecture auditorium. You have relatively small class sizes at Royal Roads, which means that anybody that you communicate with, whether that's your teachers, but as well anybody else within the Royal Roads community, like student services, financial aid, anything like that, it's always on a first names first basis. The next one on here, learning based on life. So we want what you get out of the program to be very applicable to today's issues, to today's workplaces and things like that. So we want you to take things that you are going through in your workplace or issues that are coming up or projects that you're working on or interesting changes and be able to infuse that into your coursework at the same time. And we also have professors who you learn from who have very current experience in the field. They might be currently working and or doing research in the field. So that means that everything you are learning is going to be based on what is going on in the workplace in the world out there today. The next one on here, Connections for Life. So we have a cohort model for many of our programs at Royal Roads, including this one. So that means that you start your program with a group of people, you learn with them throughout the whole journey and finish the program with them. And this creates a really awesome community and a network that lasts far beyond when you graduate, that you can draw on both professionally and personally. And I'm also an alumni of Royal Roads from a different program, and I can say that this is one of the best parts, in my opinion, of taking a program at Royal Roads, is just getting to make the connections with people who have such rich and diverse history that you end up learning from them as much as you end up learning from textbooks or anything like that. And the last one on here, we were built differently. So firstly, because we are a national historic site, which is very different than many other universities, but also when we first started Royal Roads over 25 years ago, it was with the idea to offer something that was really unique, especially at that time, and having a blended learning model. So that was meaning infusing online learning at a time where it was not very common, and that is something that we've continued on up until today. So obviously with COVID-19 and everything like that, it was a very easy transition for us if we did have any courses on campus to be able to shift those online and shift them back on campus when the time comes as well and when need be. So this is a part of who we are, and that's kind of the experience that we offer. We're also an Ashoka U CHANGEMAKER campus. So this means that the type of education that we provide at Royal Roads is very interdisciplinary, it's very entrepreneurial, it's very solutions oriented. So that is the type of education you can expect when you go to Royal Roads. And this is a designation that we're very proud of that's been given to a select number of other institutions too. A little bit of our campus. So this is a blended program, and we will be talking as well about the new on-campus offering that we'll be offering next year as well. So when it is safe to do so, again, we're very thrilled to welcome you onto our campus. The top left-hand corner there, just to give you a snapshot, is Hatley Castle. So that is a very main focal point of our campus. It was built in the early 1900s. And it's used today as a working building for staff. We have seminars and lectures in there sometimes as well, or events and things like that. So it's a wonderful hub on our campus. The top right-hand corner there is the Japanese gardens. So kind of right adjacent to the castle, we have a whole interconnected network of manicured gardens for you to explore. The Japanese gardens is just one of them. So we also have the Italian gardens, the rose gardens, there's a croquet lawn. So there's many beautiful places for you to explore if you like nature. The bottom left-hand corner, speaking of nature, is also another beautiful place for you to check out. So that is Esquimalt Lagoon, which you can also see behind the photo of the castle a little bit there. So we're right on the ocean, and it's a bird sanctuary. So it's a very calming, peaceful place for you to take a walk and relax. You can also see as well around the castle, we have lots of trees. So we're on over 500 acres of old growth forest at Royal Roads, and there's many trails for you to explore around there. And the forest itself are actually infused into a lot of the courses and things like that that we teach at Royal Roads, which is very cool to be able to get out of the classroom in that way. And then the bottom right-hand corner is just a bit of an ode to the fact that we have been doing online learning for over 25 years. And we have become very, very good at fostering those sort of online connections between classmates and your teachers when you aren't at our physical space. With that, I'm actually going to stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to let Chris pull up his slides, and we will head into the section to give you a bit of a taste of the learning experience that you can expect within the MEM program.
Okay, thanks very much, Christy, and hi to everybody. So what I'm hoping to do over the next few minutes is to just give you a flavor of some of the topics that we cover in the MEM program. I currently teach a course in sustainability science in the first residency period for the program. And, you know, this content comes primarily from that course, but obviously there isn't time on this webinar to sort of give a full experience of some of that content, but hopefully it'll give you a flavor of the sort of things that we cover. Just realized I'm on the wrong page. There we go. So some of the key themes that I cover in that course are listed here. So I'm going to go through these, just a couple of slides on each, just to hopefully give you an idea of some of the topics that we introduced during that course. So the Anthropocene is an idea that has been posited that the world we're living in now has been so influenced by human activity that it is becoming a new geological era. The extent and the breadth of those human impacts on the environment and the planetary system are significant enough that we're going to be able to see them into the geological future, and it's going to have that scale of impact on the globe. And some of these indications that we're moving into that state are, for example, an unparalleled surge in the human population. We have quadrupled the population of humanity over the last 100 years or so. And of course, just that sheer volume of numbers is going to have a massive impact. We've also developed levels of consumption and new technologies that magnify that per capita impact even more. So many of you are probably familiar with the concept of the ecological footprint, and that we are using up more resources than we have available on the globe. And that's something that can be visualized as this sort of idea of an Earth overshoot day, whereby we're going to just fundamentally use up all the resources that we have on the planet to support that population and support that consumption. And this one estimate here is that we'll reach that point by June the 28th, 2030. I mean, I suspect that's somewhat arbitrary, but it gives you the idea of the extent of the problems that we may potentially have stored up for us in the future. Because, and the other issue with that, of course, is that the more we use up those resources, the less time we have available to actually deal with that impact. Should we take the Anthropocene seriously? Well, I think it is undeniable that we are having a global impact that's going to have a permanent effect, a permanent marker in the geological record. I think it is somewhat, I think there is an open question as to whether it's truly going to be a geological epoch. In the past, most mass extinction events, for example, are a layer in the geological record rather than a whole era, and that's kind of what you can say the Anthropocene is representing. But it's certainly an incredibly good metaphor that captures the scale of human impact and describes the types of impact that humanity is having on global systems, whereby it's fundamentally altering biogeochemical processes and systems. And it certainly is raising important conversations and perspectives around the world as the term enters popular discourse. However, I think it's worth noting that planet Earth will survive, of course, whatever we do to it, unless we literally blow it all up. But I don't think we're likely to do that. Mass extinctions always inevitably result in an explosion of evolution. So, if we do manage to kill off all the species or most of the species, then there'll be a fantastic increase in evolution as a result of that. And most individual species, and including probably humans, are no more than footnotes in the geological timeline. But that's saying, is that really a good reason not to take this stuff seriously? And one of the ways that we can explore the extent of our impact on the globe is looking at the Earth's boundaries, the planetary boundaries that limit the growth of humanity's ability to grow and consume. And it provides us with an opportunity to take a holistic look at how humanity is stressing that entire Earth system. And the work on planetary boundaries has been done largely by the Stockholm Resilience Institute and they've identified a number of sort of sectors where we can track the human impact on global systems. So you can see those round the edges of this radar diagram here. And the four ones that they've determined are going to the four sort of areas of activity that have put the planet into such stress are climate change, biogeochemical flows, land use system change, and biodiversity. So Most people are fairly familiar with what climate change is now. Biogeochemical flows are things such as the way in which we use a lot of particularly nitrogen and phosphorus in the agricultural system that have fundamentally changed the way that those chemicals are cycled in the planetary system. Land use system changes are things like deforestation, desertification, urbanization, where we're changing what the surface of the Earth looks like. And biodiversity, of course, is the richness of life on Earth. So some of these are currently not easy to measure, or the point at which they're going to tip into critical areas of change is not well known. But the 4 areas where the Stockholm Resilience Institute have determined that we are in a critical state are climate change, which is in a zone of uncertainty, of increasing risk. We know if we keep on going as we are, we're going to tip over into thresholds where catastrophic change will occur. Biosphere integrity, we're actually now losing species at 10 to 100 or even more times the rate that we should be, given the natural background rate of extinction that always exists. And we have fundamentally altering particularly sort of wetland systems and also land systems with our inputs of fertilizers and such chemicals. This gives you a bit of data on that. This is obviously now getting to be a little bit, a few years old. But you know, it gives you the sort of the extent of the problems. The levels of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere are now greater, obviously, than that 396. They're in the 400s now, and the boundary of safe to unsafe and risky is 350. We're well over that. The amount of phosphorus, for example, that we're putting into from freshwater systems into the oceans is double what the safe threshold is. We've reduced the original percentage of forest cover over the globe from 75% to 62%. And we have increased, as I said, the extinction rate, background extinction rate of species from 10 extinctions per million species years to 100 to 1,000 extinctions per million species years. I'm going to focus a little bit more about then the ideas that we use in the MEM program to sort of look at some of these questions. And one of those is sustainability science. And sustainability science is really what that is outlined in this slide. So it's an emerging field of research and innovation that's inspired by the use of science to solve and examine particular issues. And so it is a very applied and practical discipline. And is not bounded by traditional disciplines that tend to have a narrower focus, and it incorporates all those different aspects of science that we have available to bring to bear on some of these questions. And it's particularly interested in focusing on the scientific understanding and interaction between human and environmental systems. And so it's not just about natural or physical sciences, it's not just about social sciences, it's about the way those two interact. And that's the only way we can deal with this fundamental issue, which is that we have a fundamental general resource of scarcity on the planet, and we have a limit to growth that is not currently represented by the way we typically do business in the political and economic realms. So human society is, of course, bounded by the Earth's ecosystem. We are based on that ecosystem. All our resources, all our comforts of modern life come from that ecosystem. And yet most economic models actually don't have that as a limiting factor. That's not factored into any typical questions in mainstream economics is the limits to growth of the Earth's ecosystem is not part of that equation. And so sustainability science, for example, suggests that we need a paradigm shift, therefore, to think about our system in socio-ecological terms rather than just in economic terms or ecological terms as being separate. Now, I apologize for the noise in the background here. So another way that we look at some of these issues are a notion of integrated sciences. And here's just a little bit of a throwaway line here from Albert Einstein that kind of sums up where that idea comes from. And that all religions, arts, and sciences are branches from the same tree. All these aspirations are directed towards ennobling man's life, lifting it from the sphere of mere physical existence. The idea there is that we can learn from all the traditions, all the disciplines that exist around the world, and can use those or learn from those in ways that help us better understand the challenges that we have in dealing with that integration between social and ecological systems. Because obviously, as the US National Academy of Sciences and Engineering points out here, environmental problems are not disconnected challenges. They do not occur in discrete autonomous systems rooted in the environment on one hand or in society in the other. And that's really captured in this slide. You know, flooding here is a natural process, and we only see it as a problem when it has impacts like this in this town from the UK, where it is, you know, clearly river is flooding into its floodplain, a totally natural and normal system, and yet we've actually built a community on that, and they're going to be very, very impacted. And too often the response to situations like this is we need to protect this town, so we're going to need to interfere even further with the natural systems to protect it and to stop that flooding from happening. And the new sort of thinking of integrated sciences, sustainability sciences, and socio-ecological systems really tries to move away from these ideas and actually work with natural systems, work with nature to come up with a solution that actually benefits both society and ecology, and you know, works with providing floodplain spaces along river corridors, so these kind of situations don't happen. But you don't just sort of put the river into a pipe, which then devastates the biodiversity and the ecological systems that river is representing. So biodiversity, one of those planetary boundaries that I spoke about earlier, we are pretty clearly into a sixth major extinction event. Probably the most famous one in the past was the end of the dinosaurs. Is that a sign of the Anthropocene? The end of the dinosaurs wasn't in itself a geological era. It was a horizon because of the meteor impact within the geological record, but it's certainly a big enough issue that we can see it in the geological impact. That sixth major extinction event is uniquely driven by the impacts of human activities. So it's our species that is driving that extinction event. And what we're seeing are non-linear and largely irreversible consequences of biodiversity loss. By non-linear, we mean that there's not a sort of gradual decline in species, and that has a predictable and linear effect on the ecological systems that are supported by that biodiversity. It also means that it's potentially irreversible. So once some of these ecosystem functions have been lost, it's going to be almost impossible to replicate them and get them back again. So what are those human activities that are causing the loss of biodiversity? Habitat destruction, you know, the burning of forests, the draining of wetlands, and those kind of activities. There's our spread of invasive species around the globe, disrupting native species and the way, you know, invasive species all too easily take over ecosystems and habitat and significantly reduce their resilience and biodiversity. Pollution, obviously, you know, pumping toxic materials into the environment doesn't usually do a good thing for biodiversity. Sheer just numbers of people taking up space, creating more tension, creating more interactions between human populations and natural populations that are inevitably bad for those natural populations. The overharvesting and hunting of various species, and just general overconsumption, leading us to need more exploitation of natural resources and digging stuff out of the ground and such things. And what is the impact of that loss of biodiversity? Well, it means that there's less resistance to the ecosystem to recover from stressful events. Of course, stressful events always happen naturally, and a lot of them are now human caused. But a sort of robust ecosystem has a much greater chance of surviving if biodiversity is present, because the natural systems then have more to draw from to respond to any changes, and more to draw from to recover from those changes. And so reduced biodiversity is likely to reduce productivity, stability, and the ability of systems to support some ecosystem services and ecological functionality. And in the program and in the course, we go into a lot more detail about some of those facets. And what is our response? Well, the main global solution to biodiversity loss is to create more and bigger protected areas. And of course, there's a huge role for protected areas. They're very, very important, but they come with negative consequences. They can exclude people from biodiversity and reinforce the notion that biodiversity is elsewhere rather than everywhere. You think of biodiversity as being something that's in that lovely park that's, a couple of hours drive away, but really biodiversity is absolutely everywhere. And it also limits opportunities for biodiversity enhancement and improvement. Protected areas, I think my analogy is you can think of more of them as a defensive mechanism that tries to hold on to what we have, rather than a progressive mechanism that tries to bring biodiversity back into areas where it's currently lacking. And can actually, in some places where it's managed badly, can create negative feelings towards biodiversity protection, because people see it as a negative. It feels exclusionary, it feels elitist, it feels a way in which their behavior is curtailed, and that can sometimes create some negative thinking towards biodiversity protection policy. They're also not sufficient. And a number of pieces of research have shown that, in fact, for example, in forests which are protected versus forests which are governed by users with sustainable forestry practices, actually means that biodiversity is no different from what in those two examples. Protected sites are hugely expensive to create and protect, and are really quite a small percentage of the global land bank. So despite some great local successes and some fantastic protected areas around the world, it's not going to be an effective and efficient solution to stem biodiversity loss on the globe as a whole. And it doesn't always necessarily protect the species with other ranges and niches that are represented within the parks. They tend to be set up to protect particular landscapes or particular species, but that's a very narrow way of looking at the world. And so one of the ways in which, one of the processes we discuss in the MEM program as a solution to this is things called CHANs. CHANs are coupled human and natural systems. And that's where you can model the way in which human systems and natural systems in a particular society or community or ecosystem interact, and try and understand how you can enhance both the human systems and natural systems to work together rather than in opposition and counter to each other. So, having the way households operate, the way businesses operate, governments operate in ways that don't negatively impact on those natural system functions, such as provision of water, clean air, soils, the biodiversity, and the plants and animals themselves. So I'm going to finish there and hand it back to Christy, but hopefully that's given you a bit of a flavor of some of the stuff that we'll be talking about during the MEM program, and hopefully has raised some interest and questions amongst you. And I haven't been following the chat, so I don't know if anyone has put any chat about that content or not. And yes, sorry about the background noise. Obviously, I can't mute myself while I'm talking. A lot of construction going on.
No, that would be kind of challenging. Oh, fair enough.
I hope it wasn't too distracting.
No, and that was great. Thank you so much, Chris. We do no specific questions about the content, just a few nice comments. Elham saying we have done a water risk assessment and it has a close relationship with some of the environmental threats we talked about. Somebody liked the statistic. One of them shared on your biodiversity section in the presentation. So thank you everybody for tuning into that one. And Chris, I believe you will be hanging on to the metaphorical mic here for this section as we overview into the program itself. There was a few questions about the MEM program that I think we'll be covering in a few moments throughout the presentation.
Yeah, again, I'm sorry about the background noise. Just one of those things with Zoom calls. The MEM program has two versions. One is I suppose you could call it the standard version that's been running for a while now. And we have upcoming a fully on-campus version that will be starting next year. It is possible to come into the current blended program as an on-campus student, but it's a not entirely separate program at this stage. And I might have got the details on that wrong, but the blended program is just over 2 years and is 36 credits long. It's built around core three 3-week residencies, well, 2 3-week residencies and 1 2-week residency that take place in the fall each year during the program. In the online periods around that, there are some core online courses and also 1 or 2 elective courses that you will need to complete between the first and third residency. And in addition to that, you take a research thesis or a major project as a capstone course for the program. Do you want to go to the next slide, Christy? The new on-campus offering, as I mentioned, launches next year. It's slightly shorter because you don't take part in those residencies, and it's a full-time program. The blended version is kind of quasi full-time, but it's slightly extended because there are periods of time when there's no actual specific course content. It's still 36 credits, and the core of the course has much the same course content. And you still complete the program with a research thesis or a major project. Next slide, please, Christy. And here are 2 examples of our amazing faculty in the MEM program. Obviously, one of them is also me, although I think we have two far more interesting faculty here on this slide. The program head of the MEM program is Dr. Ann Dale, and she has extensive experience as a civil servant in the federal government, and as well as research experience in sustainable community development. And Dr. Alice McGillivray, who comes from a leadership and complex systems, complex environments background. And she's currently teaching one of the final courses in the program, and has worked in the past with Canadian Parks Council and has been Auditor General of British Columbia. So hugely experienced faculty who come from a variety of different backgrounds and bring that expertise into their classroom with them. Next slide, please, Christy. Just to sort of give a little overview of the difference between the thesis and the project. As your capstone, the master's thesis is 12 credits and is a systematic study of a question, a research question that you will devise during your program. It's about analyzing data that you will collect during the course of your research. The master's project is a more practical based and is built around usually the implementation of previous knowledge and workspace into a specific context. So it's rather than data it's data driven in that it is based on data you're collecting as part of that project, but it's about the practical implication rather than understanding the thesis as a thesis would be the academic context of the work that you're studying. Next slide, please, Christy. And the other sort of big difference is whether you are an MA or an MSc. And this question, I think, only applies to the blended version because the on-campus version will only be an MA offering. But really, really that comes down to not the courses that you take, although there are some elective differences in the elective pools for these two streams. But it's mainly about the topics you choose for your thesis and project, and also your past educational experience, because we're not offering a foundational science or social science or humanities basis here. You'll bring that knowledge with you from your previous education, and so that will also inform which stream that you're in. And I'm not going to sort of read out this slide, but that gives you sort of the overview of the kind of topics you would be expected to be doing in the two different types of thesis. Okay, next slide, please. And that's me, I guess.
Yeah, that's it for that section. But I think before we move on to the application details, it'd be great if we looked at some of the questions in the chat box. So let's see, we had a few questions surrounding, for those working full time, how long does the program usually take, which Bev answered a little over 2 years. Someone else asked a further question to that with other universities and other master's degrees that they've taken. They were given up to 5 years to complete the program. Is there any flexibility like that for MEM?
Yes. Yeah, you can take up to 7 years to complete the program. I mean, normally that refers to the time you spend on your thesis, and we encourage everybody not to take 7 years, because really you don't want to be taking 7 years to complete your master's program if you can help it. But that is allowable. Most people do the taught part of the program on time. You know, there are a few people that will take a year off at some given period during that, but by and large, most people will do that. But it's fair to say not everyone finishes their thesis within the standard sort of timeline of the program. We have a pretty good completion rate in MEM. Most people finish either on time or within less than a year after the end, but there are some people that do take up to 7 years. But that's not don't plan for that if you can help it.
Perfect, thank you. A question regarding your presentation earlier. Sam said, great presentation. What do you take to be the major limitations to biodiversity policy focus overall?
That's a great question. And I mean, my personal take on that is that the big challenge is that we don't build in ecological functionality, ecosystems, biodiversity into all our decisions. It's very much, and this is a criticism of many aspects of policy making, is it's very sort of siloed, it's very separated, and so my tradition, where I come from, my disciplinary background is in landscape and planning, and in urban areas, which is my particular interest, you rarely see conversations about biodiversity and ecosystems outside of the context of, nature reserves and protected areas. That's increasing. We're starting to move away from that, and lots of communities in Canada and around the world are talking about nature-based solutions to, particularly in response to climate change adaptation and mitigation. Things like creating space, and I alluded to this in the presentation for flood management, for example. The idea of having green corridors throughout urban areas is increasingly something that's in planning policy, and questions around things like green roofs and things like that can provide space for biodiversity and ecosystem function within urban areas, but they're still in very much the sort of the fringes and the minority. but you know, most losses of biodiversity occur in and around cities in various different ways. There's also issues, of course, with intensive agriculture in addition to that. But the problem is we're just not building those functions into our conversations around everything that we do. It's always a sort of extra bit that's dealt with by the parks department and not something that's dealt with by you know, the decision-making body as a whole.
Perfect, thank you. And another question from Elham here about he's interested in the water and water management, I'd imagine, aspect of things. Can you think of any like specific coursework where that would be delved into a bit more? Or you mentioned any like textbooks that you can think of that would mention that?
I don't know about textbooks, but the currently in the second residency of the MEM program, the governance for sustainability course is being taught by a water systems expert. So there's a big emphasis on water management in that currently. So, you know, it's certainly something that'll be covered during the program. It's not my particular expertise, but you know, it's certainly lots of content on water management and such like is present within the program.
Perfect. Okay, let me see. Nellie's asking, does the full-time program only start in March 2022? I'm an international student applying for September 2021.
I'm not sure. I believe there is an option to do an online version currently. It's not a full program, so you know, there's not additional capacity for that. So, you know, in terms of numbers, and I know the full intake for MEM is pretty much full at this point. If you haven't yet applied, I think your chances of getting into the fall intake are pretty limited at this point anyway. I don't have the numbers myself, but maybe the other folks on this call can chip in there. I believe there is the possibility of doing that in an on-campus format if you are already in that intake, but I don't know for sure, I'm afraid.
Yeah, Alana did say she updated the next on-campus intake that is available is in March 2022. Unfortunately, the September intake is already full. And Jamil answered or asked, in addition to that, if the September 2021 intake is full and my application is still under review, does it mean that I can get a place in March 2022 intake? Only if that will be offered, only if I will be offered a place in that one. Maybe if we give Alana or Bev, if you could follow up about that, that might be easier. Unless, Chris, any thoughts on that one?
Other than there's usually a waiting list, but I mean, I don't know how long that waiting list is already, because as I said, it has been full for a bit of time. So you're probably if you haven't yet applied, it's or have a application in process, it's unlikely you're going to be able to get in this fall.
Okay.
I would never give a categorical statement on that, but that would be my assumption at this stage.
Okay, and Alana just said, yes, you can ask for your application to be moved to the next intake as well. And then Bev said, should you be offered a place, you'll be given the option to be added to the wait list or accepted into the next intake. Perfect. Thank you all for the teamwork on answering that question. Question from Adrian here. She's wondering what kind of jobs grads can be expected to obtain after the program.
I mean, the quick and glib answer to that is all sorts. I mean, really, we do have people. I mean, most students in the MEM program are already employed, and so they're using the MEM program to enhance their careers. So a lot of people don't necessarily shift employment as a result of doing the MEM program, but certainly there are people who do. So what do they go to? Well, we have people who work as anything from, we've got people who work in the oil and gas industry as ecological restoration experts. We have people who are sustainability managers for corporations and cities, municipalities. We have folks that work with sustainability officers in First Nations. We've got people who have gone on to do have careers in planning. We've got people who work in as sort of contaminated land experts. You know, all sorts really. So, but it's, as I say, it's slightly hard to tease out the impact of the MEM program over the you know, their previous experience as well. But by and large, people have a great have greater flexibility to enhance their careers and shift into a different sector if they wish to as a result of the program.
Perfect. Thank you. Next question on here. Let me just scroll back up. Is Indigenous land management explored in this program?
I think so. I don't know to what depth it is, and I know that's something that we're trying to build in more in the future. Obviously, it's covered in the current curriculum. I'm not sure to what extent, but there'll certainly be more coming in over the next few years.
Perfect, thank you. Follow-up question from Nellie here. She said she's already applied, but her main concern is about the delivery model if the full-time program is available also in September. So let me see. That might be another good one to connect afterwards to about with our enrollment.
If it's a question around sort of how it's going to get delivered because of the pandemic, I don't know if that's the subtext there, but we will be online still this fall for the residency. But my understanding is we'll certainly be going back to normal next calendar year, so in January. So if you're starting this fall, your first residency will be an online one, which is what we did last year. It worked quite well. And you'll be then on campus for the second residency. If you're in the on-campus program, then the official start date of that being March next year will be on campus. If you're in the sort of the slightly hybrid thing that we're running at the moment, then your courses this fall again will be online, and then back on campus, I believe, in January. But I mean, that's still somewhat fluid, and I don't have a you know, that's not a sort of 100% guaranteed, but it's definite that the residency this fall will be online.
Perfect. Another question about the on-campus, and I think this could apply to blended too, but kindly let me know how many days a week I will have classes on campus. He's already enrolled for the September intake, so there won't be any on-campus classes for then. But I guess in regards to like general, how many days you'd be focusing on studying and such as well could be important to cover too, even in the blended program, what folks can expect.
Well, for the any course at Royal Roads, most of them are 3 credit courses. And what that means is it means roughly 99 hours of student effort during the time of the course. So in terms of the amount of time you'll be, you know, if we were on campus, the amount of time, if you were sitting in a classroom, that would be, you know, roughly 3 hours a week, I guess, for one course, and then the other time would be spent doing, you know, sort of your own private study or teamwork. For the residency, because that's 3 courses intensively delivered, then during those 3 weeks, you're pretty much going to be in the classroom probably daily for sort of 5 to 6 hours. And then you'll be expected to work on your assignments outside of that time. So it is a kind of pretty much a full-time commitment in the residency period. You because we're doing it online, we try and we have that time to do it, so we're somewhat limited, but we do try and reduce the amount of Zoom fatigue that everyone suffers, which is just unfortunately the way we have to go, because we have to replicate the in-classroom time as much as we can. Hopefully that answers your question, though. Not certain, but probably the best I can do.
Yeah, that sounded great. And if you do need any further clarity, feel free to type in the chat box. And a little bit more on the clarity front, someone has asked, I'm not sure what fully on campus means. Will some of the classes be taught online or all in person? And I guess just clarifying that difference between the blended and the online, and of course, what's happening right now because of COVID and such.
Yeah, I mean, at the moment, no courses in the MEM program are being delivered on campus, and those courses will, so that's just how it's going. Normally speaking, the MEM program blended version, the only on-campus in-classroom time that you have is during the 3 residencies. Outside of that time, the education is all online. So that's either part courses for those that are in the residency or full courses for those that are outside the residency. Now, each course is set up usually a little bit differently in terms of, but usually you're not expected to be online at any given time, apart from the online time during the residency that hopefully will just be this one more year. That makes sense. For the on-campus program, I confess I don't know the details of whether the entirety of the delivery of that will be face-to-face in a classroom. However, the expectation is that you as a student doing that version of the program will be in Victoria during the time of your education, and the majority of the education will certainly be in the classroom. But I don't know whether it's 100%.
Thank you. Question here for this program: what percentage of the students are typically international students that you've seen?
Well, the anticipation for the on-campus version is that there'll be a higher proportion of international students engaged in that. For the blended version, which is the one we've had going for many years now, I'm not sure I know the exact percentage. It's not a very high percentage, but there's usually, say, in the classroom, it would appear that there's around 10% of the cohort in any given year that's international. Maybe the folks from the program admin side will have better figures than that. But it's I say the anticipation is that there'll be a much higher percentage of international students in the on-campus version.
Yeah, exactly. Isabella asking here, is it possible to speak with an advisor to determine what is the right fit for her between the blended and on campus and such? And yes, absolutely. A little bit further into the presentation, we'll be showing a slide that has the contact information, so you can book an appointment and chat with one of our enrollment team, like Alana and Bev, who are here in the chat box today. Question here about, so the Master of Science in Environment and Management is thesis-based or course-based. So for this, you would have the option between that thesis or the project. Anything else you'd like to add on that, Chris?
No, just that there isn't a 100% course-based graduate program in any of the MEM offering versions. It's always completed with a thesis or a major project.
Perfect, thank you. And And just looking at the time, I'm going to keep going through the slides, but we'll try to touch on the other questions that you've popped into the chat box as we go along, and maybe we'll be able to stick around for another minute or two after for the folks who do want to have their questions answered. And some of these we might answer as we go along the way too. So just to dig into what the application process looks like, I'll first a 4-year or comparable undergraduate degree in a related field with the minimum GPA of a B from a recognized post-secondary institution, at least 2 years of relevant work or volunteer experience, and then applicants who meet the degree requirements, but not the GPA requirements, will normally be required to take our academic writing and critical thinking course. We had a question submitted ahead of time about how students can really prepare to get into this program if you've been out of school for a long time. So this is one great way to do that, is to take this academic writing and critical thinking course, because no matter whether you're required to take it or not, we've heard many times that it's very useful for students to take just to get your head back into the space of research and writing and referencing and all of those different things that go along with graduate studies. So if you don't feel like you fit quite into that, what we just showed on the last slide for our standard admissions, we also have a way of assessing folks through our flexible admissions process. So this could look like people who normally have 6 years of relevant work experience, or an equivalent combination of education experience, a combination of post-secondary and professional accredited qualifications, and then all flexible admission applicants will normally be required to take that academic writing and critical thinking course as well. And just to note that this is assessed on a case-by-case basis. So if you aren't sure about your own qualifications and things like that, feel free to reach out to our team and start a conversation about that, and we'll see where we can help you and guide you through this process. So how to apply? To start off the process, there's an online application fee of $126.28. And then there's some supporting documents that you'll need to submit as part of your application. So the first one on here is your official transcripts. So these need to be sent directly from any previous institutions that you've attended, and they need to arrive sealed to us. And right now with COVID and things like that, many institutions are just emailing official transcripts, which we are accepting as well. Next on here is a detailed resume. So this can be quite lengthier than your typical job application resume, for example, and can be as detailed as you need to communicate any of your past experience. Somebody did ask a question about if they've written like an academic paper or anything like that, if they can, or a research paper, if they can submit that and have that looked at as part of their applications. This could be a place where you touch on any of the different work that you've done like that. So I would definitely include any specific projects you've worked on, papers, conferences you've attended, volunteer experience, anything like that. This is a great place to include it. And then to go with that, your personal statement. So this is a document that you submit that goes very well with your resume. So it's another place for you to really write out and explain why you want to take this program, how it will further your career goals, explain to us a little bit more about your career background or your life story or anything like that. Feel free to put it in this document so we're able to get to know you a little bit better and be able to assess if this is going to be a good fit for you to take this program. And then along the bottom here, 2 letters of reference. So the standard for this is usually if you can submit one from a professional background and one from your educational background, but there is a little wiggle room on that. Say if you've been out of school for a number of years, to submit 2 professional references, for example, and those do need to arrive, or it's ideal if they arrive from that person's professional email address, so we can verify who they are and their relation to you. So we know it's not like a cousin or a friend who is referring you for the program. So some key dates. There was a few questions about this, and I just held off on those because I knew this slide was coming up. So again, the next intake for the blended program, it starts on September 7th, 2021 with a June 6th application deadline. But like we said, this intake is actually full right now, which is we are accepting a wait list as well, but just so you are aware of that. But there is another blended intake that will be coming up the year after that if you do want to plan a little bit further in advance And the next on-campus intake is in March 2022, and the application deadline for that is December 14th, 2021. And it was mentioned a little bit higher up in the chat box there, but for processing times, once you get your application in, it can be around 4 to 6 weeks if you're a domestic student, or it can be around 12 weeks if you are applying as an international student. And just speaking to that point about our international applicants, because there may be some aspects like the work visa and study visa and working out those details to go along with the program, it's ideal if you apply for it around like 6 months in advance, just so all of those additional details to come together, have the time to come together. Alrighty, and then financial aid. So this is another really important part about planning your educational journey and going back to school. So we have an amazing team that is here to help if you do have any questions about that. So there's their contact information there. And we have a relatively smaller campus community than some other institutions at Royal Roads, which means that you actually have a pretty good chance at getting some of these funding opportunities if you do just apply. Some of them actually even go unclaimed if not enough people apply. So definitely don't hesitate to reach out and ask about that. And then our amazing enrollment team can be reached at this contact information here, or I believe Alana and Bev have both put their email addresses in the chat box somewhere as well for you to reach out directly, but here's their contact information as well. So if you'd be applying as a domestic student, you can contact that top email address there, or if you'd be applying as an international student, you can reach out at the learn.more.international@royalroads.ca. Oh, already, and just a note correction from Alana there. Just to note, the September intake for the blended offering is not yet full. The on-campus in September is. So thank you, Alana, for correcting me on that. So the application deadline for that, if you are still interested in that blended offering, is June 6th. So if you are thinking about it, it is great to get your application in as soon as possible for that. Alrighty, and we are just nearing the end of our time here. I'm just going to take a quick look at the chat box to see if there's any big burning questions that we missed. Thank you all. Some wonderful resources popped in the chat box if you want to check it out too from our enrollment team. Alrighty, one question about what age can we apply? Thank you, that's a perfect answer, Alana. Any age, we believe in lifelong learning, so there is no age limit to take our programs. Definitely don't let that hold you back. Is there a fully virtual option? So right now, because of COVID, every option is actually fully online. When we reopen to our usual operations, once it's safe to do so, there isn't a fully virtual option, but you may want to look into our blended option, which is a mix of our online courses with in-person residencies.
And it's probably worth saying that we also have a fully online master's program in the school, the Masters of Environmental Practice, which is not exactly the same curriculum, but there are certainly courses in common and similar kind of ideas presented.
Yeah, exactly. Thanks for bringing that up. There's definitely lots of other options if you are wanting to look into something fully online. We have a whole slate of amazing programs for you to look into, depending on what your needs are to come out of the program with. And with that, we are a few minutes over time. So thank you all so much for sticking around and for asking so many amazing questions. If we didn't get to any of your questions today, feel free to reach out to us directly and we can get to them there and really help you delve into if this is going to be the right program for you. So with that, thank you so much, Chris, for providing that little taste of the learning experience in the MEM program and taking us through the program. And thanks to the whole team behind the scenes, Alana and Bev, Heather and Lauren, and Mark for all helping us through the chat box today. And with that, I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, thanks everyone. Thanks for joining us. Bye now.